When my girlfriend said she was pregnant, my mom smiled and said, "Finally something normal in this house." What she didn't know was that Sarah wasn't carrying my baby. She was carrying her ex-boyfriend's child, and I'd just discovered this 3 hours before we walked into my mother's living room in Portland, Oregon. The morning had started like any other Tuesday in October. Sarah worked the night shift at Oregon Health Sciences University as a cardiac nurse, and I was getting ready for my job at a nonprofit that helped homeless LGBTQ+ youth find housing and resources. We'd been living together for 2 years in a small apartment in the Pearl District, and most people assumed we were just roommates sharing expenses in an expensive city. Sarah came home at 7 a.m., exhausted, but trying to hide something behind her usual post-shift fatigue. She'd been acting strange for weeks, distant, secretive, taking phone calls in the other room and quickly hanging up when I entered. I'd attributed it to work stress, but that morning she sat heavily on our secondhand couch and said words that changed everything. "Katie, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant." My first emotion was confusion, not joy. Sarah and I had been together intimately, but we'd always been careful about protection, and neither of us had expressed interest in having children. We were 26 and 28 respectively, focused on our careers and still figuring out our own relationship. "How?" I asked, sitting beside her. That's when she broke down crying and told me the truth. 3 months ago, during a week when we'd had a significant fight about her drinking and staying out late with coworkers, she'd spent the night with Marcus, her ex-boyfriend from nursing school. It had happened once, she insisted, during a moment of weakness and anger at me. "I was drunk and upset about our fight," she sobbed. "I ran into him at that bar on Burnside, and one thing led to another. I regretted it immediately, but I was too ashamed to tell you." I sat in stunned silence, processing not just the betrayal, but the implications. Sarah was pregnant with another man's child, and she'd been lying to me for months. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship suddenly felt uncertain. "Does he know?" I asked quietly. "No," she whispered, "and I don't want him to know. Katie, I love you. This was a terrible mistake, but I want to raise this baby with you if you'll have us." The request was enormous and complicated. I was being asked to forgive an affair and help raise a child that wasn't biologically connected to either of us. But looking at Sarah's tear-stained face, I realized something surprising about myself. I still loved her, and the idea of her being pregnant stirred something protective and nurturing in me. "I need time to think," I told her, and spent the next 3 hours walking along the Willamette River, trying to process my emotions. By the time I returned to our apartment, I'd made a decision that surprised even me. I wanted to try to make this work. Sarah's affair had hurt me deeply, but I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes, and she was willing to be completely transparent about rebuilding trust between us. "If we do this," I told her, "we do it together. No more secrets, no more contact with Marcus, and we tell people this baby is ours." That's how we ended up at my mother's house that evening, presenting a united front while I was still reeling from the morning's revelations. My mother's comment about normalcy stung for entirely different reasons than she could have imagined. The first few weeks were challenging as we navigated our new reality. Sarah was experiencing severe morning sickness, often unable to keep food down for entire days. I found myself in the unfamiliar role of caretaker, bringing her saltine crackers and ginger tea, holding her hair back when she was sick, and handling most of the household responsibilities. During this time, I discovered reserves of strength and compassion I didn't know I possessed. Despite my hurt over the affair, I felt genuinely invested in Sarah's well-being and the health of the baby she was carrying. We started attending counseling together, working through the trust issues while also preparing for parenthood. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked me one evening, after a particularly difficult day of morning sickness. "You could leave me and start over with someone else. Why are you choosing to stay?" "Because I love you," I said simply. "And because I realize I want this baby, even under these circumstances. We're creating a family built on choice and commitment, not just biology." The pregnancy progressed normally through the first trimester, but our relationship continued to be tested. Sarah's guilt manifested in overcompensation. She wanted to do everything for me, as if perfect behavior could erase her mistake. Meanwhile, I struggled with intrusive thoughts about her night with Marcus and questions about what our future would look like. At our 12-week appointment, Dr. Chen showed us the ultrasound images. Seeing the tiny form moving on the screen, I felt an unexpected surge of protective love. This baby was real, growing inside the woman I loved, and regardless of the complicated circumstances of conception, I wanted to be part of this child's life. "Everything looks healthy," Dr. Chen announced. "Would you like copies of the ultrasound photos?" "Yes," I said immediately, surprising myself with my enthusiasm. That afternoon, we called my mother to share the news officially. Her excitement was genuine and infectious, and I found myself getting caught up in her questions about due dates, baby names, and nursery preparations. For a few minutes, I could almost forget the complicated circumstances that had brought us to this moment. But reality returned that evening when Sarah's phone rang and Marcus's name appeared on the screen. She looked at me with panic in her eyes before declining the call. "He's been calling more frequently," she admitted. "I think he suspects something." "What do you mean?" I asked, anxiety rising in my chest. "He's been asking mutual friends about me, wondering why I haven't been out socializing lately. Someone might have mentioned seeing us together at the grocery store, and he knows we live together." The possibility of Marcus discovering the pregnancy and demanding involvement in the child's life terrified me. We'd built our plans around raising this baby as our own, without interference from the biological father. The legal implications alone were daunting. "We need to be prepared for the possibility that he'll figure it out," I said reluctantly. "What if he wants to be involved?" "He won't," Sarah said with certainty that I found unconvincing. "Marcus was never interested in commitment or children. He's focused on his career and dating different women every few months." Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were living on borrowed time before our secret was discovered. The second trimester brought relief from morning sickness and a growing excitement about the future. We painted the spare bedroom pale green and started shopping for baby essentials. Sarah's body was changing in ways that fascinated and amazed me, and I found myself feeling protective of both her and the baby in ways that surprised me. We decided not to find out the baby's sex, wanting to maintain some element of surprise. This decision felt symbolic somehow. After all the unexpected revelations and changes in our relationship, we were comfortable with uncertainty about some things. "Have you thought about what the baby will call you?" Sarah asked one day, while we were assembling a crib. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't considered the practical aspects of being a non-biological parent in a same-sex relationship. Would I be mom, mama, or something else entirely? "I guess we'll figure it out when the time comes," I said. But the question stayed with me. At 24 weeks, our carefully constructed world began to unravel. Sarah came home from work one morning looking shaken and pale beyond her usual post-shift exhaustion. "Marcus was at the hospital last night," she said without preamble. "He's doing a rotation in the cardiac unit." My stomach dropped. "Did he see you?" "Yes," she whispered. "And he noticed I was pregnant." The confrontation she described was everything I'd feared. Marcus had approached her during her break, immediately noticing her obviously pregnant belly. When he'd asked about the father, Sarah had tried to deflect, but Marcus was observant and suspicious. "He counted back the months," Sarah continued. "He knows the timeline matches our night together." "What did you tell him?" I denied it was his, but I don't think he believed me. "He said he was going to call me later to talk." That phone call came at 3 p.m. while I was at work. Sarah called me immediately afterward, crying so hard I could barely understand her words. "He wants a paternity test," she managed to say between sobs. "He said he has a right to know if this is his child." The legal realities of our situation became starkly apparent. If Marcus was indeed the biological father, he would have parental rights regardless of our wishes. Our plans to raise this baby as our own could be completely disrupted by custody arrangements, visitation schedules, and the involvement of someone who hadn't been part of our pregnancy journey. "We need a lawyer," I said, trying to stay calm while my mind raced through implications and possibilities. The next few weeks were a blur of legal consultations, emotional conversations, and growing anxiety about the future. Our lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, was experienced in LGBTQ+ family law, but she was honest about the challenges we faced. If the paternity test confirms Marcus is the biological father, he'll have legal rights, she explained during our first meeting. However, his level of involvement will depend on what he chooses to pursue and what the court determines is in the child's best interest. Meanwhile, Marcus had retained his own lawyer and was demanding the paternity test be conducted as soon as it was safe for the baby. The non-invasive test could be done at 9 weeks, but we were already past that point, so we would have to wait until after birth for conclusive results. The stress was affecting Sarah's health and our relationship. She was experiencing elevated blood pressure and insomnia, while I was struggling with resentment about the situation and fear about our future. The joy and anticipation we'd built around this pregnancy was being overshadowed by legal uncertainty and the intrusion of someone we'd hoped to avoid. "I keep thinking this is punishment for lying to you," Sarah said one night as we lay in bed, both unable to sleep. "This isn't punishment," I replied, though I sometimes wondered if the universe was testing our commitment to each other and this unconventional family we were trying to create. At 32 weeks, Sarah went into premature labor. I was at work when she called, her voice tight with pain and fear. "The contractions are 3 minutes apart," she said. "I need to get to the hospital." I met her in the emergency room where doctors were working to stop the labor and keep the baby safely inside for a few more weeks. Sarah was given medication to slow the contractions and strict bed rest orders, which meant she had to take medical leave from her job earlier than planned. The financial implications added another layer of stress to our situation. Sarah's reduced income, combined with mounting legal fees and medical expenses, stretched our budget beyond its limits. I picked up extra freelance work, but the long hours meant less time to care for Sarah during a high-risk phase of her pregnancy. During one of Sarah's hospital stays for monitoring, Marcus appeared in her room uninvited. The confrontation that followed was emotional and heated, with Marcus demanding answers about his parental rights, and Sarah insisting he had no claim to a child she planned to raise with me. "This is my baby too," Marcus argued. "You can't just decide I don't exist." "You didn't exist for the first 7 months of this pregnancy," Sarah shot back. "You don't get to show up now and make demands." Hospital security had to escort Marcus from the building, but the incident left Sarah shaken, and me feeling helpless to protect her from the chaos his involvement was creating. Our lawyer advised us to document everything: Marcus's unexpected appearances, his threatening messages, and any behavior that could be construed as harassment. We were building a case for limited visitation if the paternity test confirmed our fears, but the process was emotionally exhausting for both of us. At 36 weeks, labor began again, and this time, it couldn't be stopped. Sarah's water broke at 2 a.m., and we rushed to the hospital knowing our baby was coming whether we were ready or not. The labor progressed quickly, lasting only 6 hours from start to finish. Our daughter was born healthy despite being 4 weeks early, weighing 5 pounds, 8 ounces. She had Sarah's delicate features and a full head of dark hair that reminded me of my own baby pictures. Holding her for the first time, I felt an overwhelming surge of protective love that erased any doubts about my commitment to this child. She was beautiful and perfect, and in that moment, questions of biology seemed irrelevant compared to the fierce maternal instinct I felt toward her. "She's ours," Sarah whispered, exhausted but glowing as she held our daughter. "Whatever happens with Marcus, she's ours." We named her Elena, a name we'd both loved throughout the pregnancy. She was alert and calm, seeming to study our faces with serious dark eyes that held wisdom beyond her hours of life. The paternity test was conducted when Elena was 3 days old, a simple cheek swab that would determine the legal framework for our family's future. The results would take 2 weeks to process, 2 weeks of uncertainty while we bonded with our daughter and tried to establish routines as new parents. Marcus had hired a lawyer who specialized in fathers' rights cases, and we knew he was prepared to fight for custody and visitation if the test confirmed his paternity. Meanwhile, we were documenting every moment of Elena's early life, creating a record of our involvement and care that might be relevant in future legal proceedings. Elena was a good baby, sleeping for 3-hour stretches and feeding well despite her early arrival. Sarah was recovering normally from childbirth, and we were both amazed by how quickly we adapted to the rhythms of infant care. The middle-of-the-night feedings and diaper changes felt natural and necessary, reinforcing our sense of being Elena's true parents regardless of genetics. The test results arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by certified mail that required my signature. Sarah was breastfeeding Elena when I opened the envelope, my hands shaking as I read the laboratory findings. Marcus was indeed Elena's biological father, with 99.9% certainty. Sarah burst into tears when I told her, not from surprise, but from the finality of knowing our worst fears were confirmed. We now faced the reality of sharing our daughter with someone who had played no role in her conception story beyond one night of poor judgment. "What happens now?" Sarah asked through her tears. "Now we fight for our family," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure what that meant or how we would manage it. Marcus's lawyer contacted us within hours of receiving the same results, proposing a custody arrangement that would give him alternating weekends and 1 evening per week with Elena. The proposal felt like a knife through my heart. This man, who had been absent for the entire pregnancy, was now demanding significant time with the daughter Sarah and I had planned and prepared for together. Our lawyer advised us to negotiate, rather than let a judge decide Elena's fate, but every proposed arrangement felt like losing pieces of our family to someone who felt like a stranger. Marcus had never changed a diaper, never attended a doctor's appointment, never felt Elena kick from inside Sarah's belly, yet he was being granted parental rights equal to ours. The mediation sessions were emotionally brutal. Marcus presented himself as a concerned father who wanted to be involved in his daughter's life, while we argued that Elena's best interests were served by maintaining the stable family structure we'd created. Both sides presented compelling arguments, but the law was clear about biological father's rights. "I know this is difficult," the mediator said during one particularly tense session, "but we need to focus on what's best for Elena, not what's most convenient for the adults involved." The final custody arrangement granted Marcus every other weekend and one evening per week, with provisions for holidays and vacation time. Sarah and I retained primary custody, but we would have to share our daughter with someone whose values and parenting style were unknown to us. Elena's first transition to Marcus's apartment happened when she was 2 months old. Handing over our tiny daughter to someone who felt like a stranger was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Sarah cried for hours after Marcus left with Elena, both of us sick with worry about how she would be cared for away from us. "What if he doesn't know how to soothe her when she cries?" Sarah worried. "What if he doesn't hold her properly, or doesn't notice if she's hungry?" These fears proved largely unfounded. Marcus, despite his absence during the pregnancy, was a capable caretaker who seemed genuinely interested in being a good father to Elena. He followed our feeding schedule, sent updates and photos throughout his visitation time, and returned Elena clean, fed, and content. But his involvement changed the dynamic of our small family in ways we hadn't anticipated. Elena would return from Marcus's house with new clothes, toys, and sometimes different routines that conflicted with the patterns we'd established. Marcus had strong opinions about everything from feeding schedules to sleep training, opinions he felt entitled to share since he was Elena's biological father. "I think she should be sleeping through the night by now," he announced during one custody exchange. "My mother raised 4 children and says 3 months is old enough for sleep training." "We're following our pediatrician's recommendations," I replied evenly, though I resented having to justify our parenting decisions to someone who saw Elena 12 hours per week. These conflicts extended to larger questions about Elena's upbringing. Marcus wanted her baptized in the Catholic Church where he'd grown up, while Sarah and I preferred to let Elena choose her own spiritual path when she was older. He had opinions about childcare, preschool selection, and even the neighborhood where we lived. "I'm not comfortable with Elena being in daycare before she's 2, Marcus declared during one of our mandatory co-parenting meetings. "Studies show that early daycare exposure increases illness and behavioral problems. Sarah needs to return to work," I explained patiently. "We've researched our daycare extensively, and it has excellent ratings and small class sizes. Then maybe Sarah should consider staying home," Marcus suggested. "I could contribute more financially to make that possible." The offer was tempting from a practical standpoint, but felt like a manipulation tactic designed to increase his influence over our family's decisions. Sarah and I discussed it extensively, but ultimately decided that maintaining our independence was more important than Marcus's financial contributions. As Elena grew and developed her own personality, the custody arrangement became more emotionally complicated. She began recognizing different caregivers and showing preferences for familiar routines. Transitions between households sometimes involved tears and clinginess, breaking our hearts every time. "Mama go?" Elena would ask when Marcus arrived for his scheduled time, reaching for Sarah with confusion in her dark eyes. "Mama will see you tomorrow," Sarah would promise, kissing Elena's forehead while fighting back her own tears. These moments reinforced my anger about the situation we'd been forced into. Elena didn't understand why she had to leave the security of our home to spend time with someone who, despite his biological connection, was essentially a stranger disrupting her world twice a week. But there were also unexpected benefits to Marcus's involvement that I reluctantly had to acknowledge. Elena was exposed to extended family through Marcus's parents and siblings, giving her a larger network of people who loved her. Marcus's family welcomed both Sarah and me, recognizing that we were Elena's primary caregivers and showing respect for our relationship despite their traditional Catholic background. "You two are doing a wonderful job with her," Marcus's mother Rosa told us during Elena's first birthday party. "She's lucky to have so many people who love her." The party itself was a study in complex family dynamics. Sarah and I had planned a small celebration in our apartment, but Marcus requested that his family be included. The result was an awkward but ultimately successful gathering where Elena was showered with attention and gifts from her biological father's extended family while maintaining her primary attachment to Sarah and me. "She looks like Marcus when he was a baby," Rosa observed, showing us photos from Marcus's childhood. "But she has Sarah's gentle temperament." These observations about Elena's genetics and inherited traits were bittersweet reminders of the complicated circumstances of her birth. She was indeed a blend of characteristics from people who barely knew each other, raised primarily by two women who loved her unconditionally, but shared no biological connection to her. As Elena approached her second birthday, our custody arrangement evolved to accommodate her changing needs and developmental stages. Marcus requested additional time during holidays and proposed taking Elena for a week-long vacation to visit his brother's family in California. "Absolutely not," was my immediate reaction. "She's too young to be away from us for that long." "She needs to know her extended family," Marcus argued. "My brother has 3 children, and Elena should have relationships with her cousins." The dispute required mediation and ultimately resulted in a compromise. Marcus could take Elena for long weekend trips, but week-long separations would wait until she was older and more comfortable with extended time away from Sarah and me. These negotiations reminded me constantly that our family's decisions were subject to approval from courts and mediators, rather than being private choices made by the people who loved Elena most. Every major decision, from preschool selection to medical care, required consultation with Marcus, and sometimes legal intervention when we disagreed. "I never thought raising a child would involve so many lawyers," Sarah said exhaustedly, after one particularly contentious mediation session about Elena's education. "I never thought we'd be co-parenting with someone who wasn't part of our relationship," I replied, equally drained by the ongoing conflicts and negotiations. But despite the challenges and complications, Elena was thriving. She was reaching all her developmental milestones, showing signs of intelligence and creativity that delighted everyone who knew her. She had Sarah's compassionate nature and an independence that reminded me of myself at her age. "Mama, read story," she would demand, climbing onto my lap with her favorite book about a family of bears. These quiet moments of connection reassured me that despite the complicated circumstances of Elena's birth and custody arrangement, she felt secure and loved. Sarah and I were her primary attachment figures, the people she turned to for comfort and guidance, and that relationship couldn't be diminished by legal documents or visitation schedules. Now, as Elena approaches her 3rd birthday, I reflect on the unexpected journey that brought us to this point. We began with Sarah's pregnancy announcement and my mother's comment about normalcy, but nothing about our experience has been normal or predictable. We've navigated betrayal and forgiveness, legal battles and custody arrangements, financial strain and emotional exhaustion. We've learned to co-parent with someone who wasn't part of our relationship while maintaining our commitment to each other and our daughter. Elena calls both Sarah and me Mama, though she's learned to distinguish between us when necessary. She calls Marcus Daddy, and seems to accept the reality of having 3 primary caregivers without questioning the unusual arrangement. "Where you go, Mama?" she asks when I leave for work each morning. "Mama goes to work to help people," I explain. "But Mama always comes home to Elena." These daily reassurances of my permanent presence in her life feel important, given the disruptions caused by custody transitions twice weekly. I want Elena to know that while some people in her life come and go according to schedules and legal requirements, Sarah and I are constants she can depend on completely. The experience has changed both Sarah and me in profound ways. Sarah has become more assertive and confident, advocating fiercely for Elena's needs in co-parenting discussions and legal proceedings. I've discovered reserves of patience and diplomacy I didn't know I possessed, learning to navigate complex relationships for Elena's benefit, even when my personal preferences would be different. Our relationship has also evolved and deepened through these challenges. The affair that initially brought crisis to our partnership ultimately led to growth and renewed commitment. We've learned to support each other through difficulties we never could have imagined, and our love has been tested and proven resilient. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked me recently as we watched Elena play in the park, running between us and Marcus during one of his visitation periods. "Which part?" I asked. "Any of it. The pregnancy, the custody battle, the complications. Do you ever wish you'd made different choices when I first told you about the affair?" I considered her question seriously, watching Elena's face light up as she discovered a ladybug on the playground equipment, No, I said finally. It's been harder than anything I ever imagined. But look what we have. Elena is amazing, and we're a family, even if we're not the family we originally planned. Elena ran toward us, clutching the ladybug gently in her small hands. Look, Mama's bug. Very pretty bug, Sarah agreed, helping Elena examine the tiny creature before releasing it back to the garden. These moments of simple joy and wonder remind me why we fought so hard to maintain our family through all the complications and challenges. Elena deserves to grow up feeling loved and secure, regardless of the unusual circumstances that brought her into the world. The future holds more challenges as Elena grows older and begins asking more complex questions about her family structure. We'll need to explain the custody arrangement, help her understand her relationship with Marcus and his family, and support her as she navigates having parents who don't all live together. But we've already proven we can handle unexpected complications and legal complexities while keeping Elena's well-being as our primary focus. Sarah and I have built something strong and lasting together, something that can weather the storms of custody battles and co-parenting conflicts. Our family might not look normal to other people, I told Sarah, as we walked home from the park that afternoon, Elena sleeping peacefully in her stroller after an afternoon of exploration and play. But it's ours, Sarah replied, and Elena is loved by more people than most children ever are. That has to count for something. She's right. Our family was created through unexpected circumstances and maintained through legal negotiations and emotional resilience. But it's built on the same foundation of love and commitment that makes any family strong. Elena will grow up knowing she was wanted and fought for, knowing that the adults in her life put her needs before their own comfort and convenience. That's not normal by most people's standards, but it's something better. It's love strong enough to overcome any obstacle and create a family worth fighting for. Elena's third birthday party was held at the community center near our apartment, a compromise venue that could accommodate both sides of her extended family. What should have been a simple celebration became another exercise in diplomatic co-parenting, with Sarah and me coordinating with Marcus about everything from the guest list to the cake flavor. I invited my cousin Angela and her kids, Marcus announced 2 weeks before the party. Elena should meet more of her family. How many additional people are we talking about? I asked, mentally calculating the extra cost and space requirements. Just Angela, her husband, and their 3 children. They're driving down from Seattle specifically for Elena's birthday. The guest list had grown from 15 to 28 people, straining both our budget and the community center's capacity. But seeing Elena's excitement about having lots of people at her party made the logistics worthwhile. The day of the party, Elena wore a bright purple dress with silver butterflies, her current favorite colors. She moved between groups of relatives and friends with the confidence of a child who knew herself to be universally adored. Watching her interact with Marcus's extended family, I was struck by how naturally she'd adapted to having multiple sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. She has your eyes, Angela told me during the cake cutting, but Marcus's stubborn streak. I can tell she knows exactly what she wants. The comment caught me off guard. Angela was acknowledging my role as Elena's parent, while also noting the genetic traits Elena had inherited from Marcus. It was a delicate balance that Marcus's family had learned to navigate, recognizing the reality of who raised Elena daily, while honoring the biological connections that couldn't be ignored. She definitely has strong opinions, I agreed, watching Elena negotiate with another child about sharing her new art supplies. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Elena was asleep surrounded by new toys, Sarah and I cleaned up the remnants of the party. The community center looked like a birthday explosion had occurred. Streamers on the floor, frosting on the tables, and gift wrap scattered everywhere. She had a good time, Sarah observed, collecting paper plates and plastic cups. She did, and I have to admit, Marcus's family was really welcoming. Angela even asked if we'd consider bringing Elena to Seattle for Christmas to visit their extended family. What did you tell her? That we'd discuss it with Marcus and see what works with our custody schedule. The Seattle trip proposal represented a new phase in our co-parenting relationship. Elena was old enough now to benefit from extended family relationships, but long-distance travel required coordination and trust that we were still building with Marcus. 2 weeks after the party, Marcus approached us with a more significant request. He'd been offered a promotion at the engineering firm where he worked, but it would require relocating to Denver, Colorado. I want to take Elena with me, he announced during one of our monthly co-parenting meetings. The schools are better in Denver, and the cost of living is lower. I could provide her with opportunities she won't have in Portland. My blood went cold. The custody arrangement that had felt oppressive but manageable when Marcus lived 20 minutes away would become impossible if he moved to another state. Elena's life is here, Sarah said firmly. Her friends, her preschool, her routine. You can't just uproot her because you got a job offer. I have parental rights, Marcus replied, and I think Elena would benefit from experiencing different parts of the country. The legal battle that followed was the most intense and expensive conflict we'd faced since Elena's birth. Marcus petitioned the court for permission to relocate with Elena, while we fought to maintain the existing custody arrangement that kept her primarily in Portland with us. Our lawyer, Jennifer, was honest about the challenges we faced. Oregon courts generally try to preserve relationships with both parents, but they also consider what's in the child's best interest. If Marcus can demonstrate that Denver offers significant advantages for Elena's education and quality of life, the judge might allow the relocation. The next 3 months were consumed with legal preparations, expert witnesses, and psychological evaluations. Elena was assessed by child psychologists to determine her attachment patterns and preferences, a process that felt invasive and traumatic for all of us. "Why do I have to talk to the lady with questions?" Elena asked after one of her evaluation sessions. "The grown-ups are trying to make decisions about where you'll live and go to school," I explained carefully. "The lady helps us understand what you think and feel." "I want to live with you and Mama Sarah," Elena said matter-of-factly. "Daddy can visit like always." Her clear preference for maintaining the status quo was documented by the psychologist, but the final decision rested with a judge who would weigh multiple factors beyond Elena's stated wishes. During this period, the stress affected every aspect of our lives. Sarah was having trouble sleeping and had developed anxiety symptoms that interfered with her work performance. I was spending hours each week meeting with lawyers and gathering documentation to support our case. Our relationship with Marcus became increasingly adversarial as we fought over Elena's future. "I never wanted it to be like this," Marcus said during one particularly heated mediation session. "I just want what's best for Elena." "Then consider what uprooting her from everything familiar would actually do to her," I replied. "She's thriving here. Why would you risk that for a job opportunity?" The trial lasted 3 days, with both sides presenting evidence about Elena's current living situation, the proposed relocation benefits, and expert opinions about child development and attachment. Sarah and I testified about our daily routines with Elena, our involvement in her education and health care, and our commitment to maintaining stability in her life. Marcus presented financial projections showing how his increased salary in Denver could provide Elena with private school education, travel opportunities, and a larger living space. His family members testified about their desire to be more involved in Elena's life and the benefits of having extended family nearby. The judge deliberated for 2 weeks before issuing her decision. Marcus would be allowed to relocate to Denver, but Elena would remain in Portland with Sarah and me as her primary caregivers. Marcus could have Elena for extended summer visits, alternate holidays and school breaks, but her primary residence and school enrollment would remain unchanged. The court finds that Elena's best interests are served by maintaining stability in her primary living situation, the judge explained. While the defendant has demonstrated potential benefits of relocation, the disruption to the child's established relationships and routines outweighs those advantages. The relief Sarah and I felt was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the knowledge that Marcus would now be living 800 miles away. Elena would see her biological father much less frequently, and when she did visit him, she'd be completely removed from her familiar environment. Marcus moved to Denver 2 months later, and Elena's first visit to his new apartment happened during her spring break from preschool. Sending our 3-year-old daughter on an airplane to spend a week with Marcus in an unfamiliar city was one of the most anxiety-provoking experiences of my life. "Daddy lives far away now?" Elena asked as we prepared for her trip. "Yes. Daddy moved to a different city for his work," I explained. "But you'll get to visit him and see his new home. Will you come too?" "Not this time, sweetheart. This is special time for you and Daddy." Elena adapted to the new arrangement with the resilience typical of young children, but the transitions were harder now. Instead of brief separations twice a week, she was gone for entire weeks at a time, returning with stories about mountains and snow that we couldn't share or verify. "Daddy has a big house," she reported after her first Denver visit, "and there's a dog named Charlie." These details of Marcus's new life felt like glimpses into a parallel universe where Elena had different experiences and relationships that we couldn't access or understand. The geographical distance had created emotional distance as well, making it harder to maintain the cooperative co-parenting relationship we'd worked so hard to establish. When Elena turned 4, we faced new challenges around her education and development. She was eligible for pre-K programs in Portland, but Marcus wanted input on school selection despite living in Denver. He also had strong opinions about extracurricular activities, arguing that Elena should focus on academics rather than the art classes and dance lessons she enjoyed. "She's showing real intellectual curiosity," Marcus said during one of our video conference co-parenting meetings. "I think she should be in a more academically rigorous program." "She's 4, Sarah pointed out. "She should be playing and exploring, not preparing for college." These philosophical differences about Elena's upbringing became more pronounced as she grew older and developed her own interests and personality. Elena loved art, music, and storytelling, talents that Sarah and I nurtured through classes and creative activities. Marcus preferred structured learning and competitive activities, enrolling her in chess lessons and math camps during her Denver visits. "I learned about fractions," Elena announced excitedly after one summer visit with Marcus, "and I can play 3 songs on the keyboard." Her enthusiasm for learning was wonderful, but the different approaches to her education sometimes left Elena confused about expectations and priorities. She was getting mixed messages about what was important and valuable, requiring careful navigation from Sarah and me to help her understand that different people had different strengths and interests. The summer Elena turned 5, Marcus remarried. His new wife, Linda, was a kindergarten teacher who seemed genuinely interested in building a relationship with Elena. This development added another layer of complexity to our co-parenting arrangement, as Linda now had opinions and preferences about Elena's care during Denver visits. "Linda thinks Elena should learn Spanish," Marcus announced during one of our regular check-ins. "She's starting her in-classes this summer." "That's great," I said, though I felt a familiar pang of exclusion. "Sarah speaks Spanish fluently and has been reading Spanish books with Elena since she was a baby." "Really? I didn't know that." These gaps in Marcus's knowledge about Elena's daily life were reminders of how much distance, both geographical and emotional, affected his understanding of who she was becoming. Sarah and I knew Elena's favorite foods, her bedtime rituals, her fears and dreams, while Marcus was learning about her in concentrated doses during scheduled visits. But Linda's involvement also brought unexpected benefits. She understood child development and advocated for Elena's emotional needs during transitions between households. She also served as a buffer during conflicts between Marcus and us, often suggesting compromises that worked for everyone. "Linda says I can call you every night when I'm in Denver," Elena reported happily after her first visit following Marcus's remarriage. "She helped me remember your phone number." These small gestures of inclusion and consideration from Linda made a significant difference in Elena's comfort level during Denver visits. She had an advocate who understood the challenges of being a child, moving between different families and expectations. As Elena started kindergarten in Portland, her awareness of her unusual family situation became more apparent. She began asking questions about why her friend's parents lived together while her daddy lived far away. "Are you and Mama Sarah married like other mommies and daddies?" she asked one evening during bedtime stories. "Yes, we're married," I explained. "But families come in different shapes. Some children have one mommy and one daddy who live together. Some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Some live with grandparents or aunts and uncles. Your family is special because you have 2 mommies who live together and a daddy who lives in Denver. And Linda," Elena added. "She's my stepmom." "That's right. You have lots of people who love you." Elena seemed satisfied with this explanation, but I knew more complex questions would come as she grew older and became more aware of the circumstances surrounding her birth and custody arrangement. The school year brought new challenges around logistics and communication. Elena's teacher needed to understand our custody arrangement for scheduling conferences and school events. There were forms to fill out listing emergency contacts in 2 different states, and decisions to make about who could pick Elena up from school, or make medical decisions in various scenarios. "This is more complicated than international diplomacy," Sarah observed after spending an hour on the phone with the school secretary, explaining why Elena had 3 different last names among her caregivers and emergency contacts. But Elena was thriving academically and socially, making friends easily, and showing the confidence that came from knowing herself to be unconditionally loved by multiple adults. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, commented on Elena's maturity and emotional intelligence during our first parent conference. "Elena talks about her family with such pride," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "She's taught the other children that families can look different, and she's very protective of classmates who also have non-traditional family structures. These reports of Elena's social development reassured us that despite the complexities of her custody arrangement, she was developing into a secure and compassionate child who could navigate different relationships and expectations. The Christmas when Elena was 5 brought a new challenge, when Marcus requested that she spend the entire 2-week school break in Denver. This was significantly longer than any previous visit, and Sarah and I worried about the impact on Elena's routine and our own holiday traditions. "We always decorate the tree together on Christmas Eve," Sarah pointed out during our negotiation. "And Elena has been looking forward to the children's pageant at our community center. She can participate in Christmas activities here too," Marcus replied. "Linda's family has a big celebration, and Elena should be part of that." The compromise we reached required Elena to split the holiday break between both families, flying back and forth during what should have been a relaxing vacation period. The logistics were exhausting, but Elena handled the transitions with grace, adapting her expectations to accommodate multiple Christmas celebrations and gift exchanges. "I got 2 Christmases," she announced proudly to her kindergarten classmates after returning to school. "One with my mommies, and one with my daddy and Linda." Her ability to find joy in the complications that stressed the adults in her life was a constant source of amazement to me. Elena had never known a different way of living, so the custody arrangements and multiple households felt normal to her in ways they never could to us. As Elena approached her 6th birthday, I reflected on how much our family had evolved since that shocking morning when Sarah announced her pregnancy. We'd navigated betrayal and forgiveness, legal battles and custody arrangements, geographical separation, and blended family dynamics. Elena was no longer the baby we'd fought to protect and claim. She was becoming her own person, with preferences and opinions that didn't always align with what any of her parents wanted. She had relationships with Marcus and Linda that existed independently of Sarah's and my approval, and she was learning to navigate complex emotional terrain that most children never encountered. "Do you think we made the right choices?" Sarah asked me one evening as we watched Elena video chat with Marcus and Linda, excitedly showing them a painting she'd created at school. "Which choices?" I asked. "All of them. Staying together after the affair, fighting for custody, agreeing to the long-distance arrangement. Do you think Elena is better off because of the decisions we made?" I watched Elena's animated face as she described her artwork to her father and stepmother, seeing joy and confidence in her expression. "Look at her," I said. "She's happy, secure, and loved by more people than most children ever are. She's learning to navigate complex relationships and different expectations, skills that will serve her well throughout her life. I think we made the best choices we could with the information we had, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Elena will grow up knowing that the adults in her life fought for her, that we put her needs before our own comfort and convenience. That's not a small thing." Elena finished her video call and ran over to us, climbing onto the couch between Sarah and me. "Daddy says he's coming to my birthday party," she announced. "And Linda might come too if she doesn't have to work." "That sounds wonderful," I said, meaning it. "We'll make sure they feel welcome." Elena snuggled between us, content and secure in the knowledge that all the important people in her life would be there to celebrate with her. The complications that had once felt overwhelming now seemed like simply the logistics of loving a child who belonged to multiple families. "I love my big family," Elena said sleepily, her head resting against Sarah's shoulder. "We love our big family too," Sarah replied, kissing the top of Elena's head. Looking at our daughter, confident, loved, and entirely herself despite the unusual circumstances of her birth and upbringing, I realized that my mother had been right about something being normal in our house. Not normal in the traditional sense, but normal in the ways that mattered most, filled with love, laughter, and the daily routines of family life. Elena might have been conceived through betrayal and born into legal complexity, but she was being raised with intention, commitment, and unconditional love. That wasn't the family any of us had originally planned, but it was the family we'd built together through choice and determination.